and remind you I don't mind you. May have been alright, but babe, it's only half the time, and honestly, I'm fine. Keep my own advice. I'm thinking of if we tried, but nothing unsatisfied. But nothing's over. There's a weight in my bed where you lay and you said, I don't know you. I don't know you. If we tried to retrace, would it show on my face and remind you I don't mind you?
KCYP 97.7 FM, the city. I want to welcome everyone who is tuning into our frequency over the FM dial on 97.7 FM, those that are out and about this Sunday morning in the McAllen, Edinburgh, Mission area. Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. I also want to welcome everyone that's listening to us through thecity977.com, as well as on our TuneIn radio app, keyword thecity977, as well as our Facebook Live audience and our YouTube audience. Thank you for tuning in. Today we have our first Sunday edition. As you know, we rarely go on live on Sundays, but we had to go on live this particular Sunday. We have a very, very interesting individual here in the studio, and we had to bring him in and talk to him. His name is Frank Lopez, and he is a 30-year veteran of the Border Patrol, as well as the U.S. Army. He served in the U.S. Army as well. And so I just had to bring him here because he is from Del Rio, Texas. And as you know, there's a lot going on right now in Del Rio. And I just felt that we needed to hear the story of what's happening out there from a perspective of a retired Border Patrol agent who knows the operations of the area, as well as a citizen from Del Rio. Sir, welcome to the show. Thank you for making the time coming out here and joining us this Sunday.
Yes.
And now we're recording this. We're going live, but we're recording this, and we are going to keep playing it on 97.7 FM for the next 2 weeks at various times. So we want to welcome you guys for listening, and sir, welcome to our studio.
Hey, no problem, Joe. Thanks. Yeah, and also full disclosure, we're family.
That's right.
You're married to my cousin. So that's the other aspect of it down here. But thanks for having me here this morning. So you want me to give a little bit of background on myself, I guess? Let me just tell folks, hey, just so you know, I was born in McAllen, raised in Alamo. So I'm a Valley boy. I got family all up and down the Valley here, Fort San Juan, Alamo, Edinburgh, Harlingen, El Gato. Hey, shout out to El Gato down there south of Alamo. And so I'm pleased to be here from Del Rio, Texas, visiting in the area, So, and you're right, I served in the Army. I was a military policeman for 3 years. After we moved to El Paso, my dad was actually hired by the Border Patrol. So we moved to El Paso from the Valley, 3 years in the Army as a military policeman in Georgia, Honduras, Central America, and Mainz, West Germany. I got out, went to college for a very short time, but then I joined the Border Patrol 30 years later, married for 30 years to my beautiful wife, Ida, and I have
awesome twin sons, Seth and Israel. And shout out to them. They're watching as well. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you for sharing a little bit about yourself
Yes.
with us. Now, please tell me, what is going on in Del Rio, because depending on what media source you hear,
Yes.
you'll hear a different narrative. But we want to know from your perspective, a citizen, local citizen of Del Rio, and a former Border Patrol agent of 30 years, knowing very well the operations of the area. What is happening right now in Del Rio?
So what happened, Joe? We made the national news, unfortunately, at the tail end of a situation that had just basically gotten out of control. So immigration is a part of our history. We are a nation of immigrants, but we've set up a process. And it is the naturalization process, immigration process. We've got laws to control it, to enforce those laws. It's all a part of our history, but and it's always existed between our nations. We have immigration on the southern border, we have immigration on the northern border from Canada, and what started happening recently in 2018, I'll say 2018, when I was still in the Border Patrol. I retired at the end of in December 2018. Caravans started coming up from the north. You may remember that during the Trump administration, we started getting these big caravans coming up, and they threatening to overwhelm our resources, our capacities to really overwhelm the system, the process that we've put in place for orderly immigration. And so at that point, what the president back then, Trump, did was he spoke about enacting, tightening down on the economic trade between Mexico and the United States. And so that led to Mexico being incentivized to do something about the immigration that was coming up north. And so and part of that was the asylum remain in Mexico executive order that he signed in, where certainly part of our system is humanitarian, refugee, asylum, leaving room for those kinds of classes of people. But under that administration, what he did was, look, you can apply for asylum once we capture you, once you cross illegally into the United States, and those are going to be kind of some buzzwords for people there as to that aspect. But anyways, once you enter the United States at a point not designated as an entry, as an entry port, then they would be caught, processed by the Border Patrol, and returned to Mexico to await an asylum here in the United States. So that's what was in place. Well, when Joe Biden was elected and came into office in January, he took that executive order off the table, Joe, and he had signaled that he was going to do that actually as a candidate in late spring, early summer of 2020. He said, if I become president, we're going to welcome you to America. And so people started getting the word, because there is a communication system, that takes place. A word goes out. And so they started coming north. And so subsequently, you can go to U.S. Customs and Border Protection website. You can see just the increase starting in January of apprehensions of people that were being caught as they were entering the United States, Joe. And that's just, keep in mind, folks, that's just the people we were catching. At the same time that's going on, there's what is called gotaways. There were people that were circumventing, going around, going through the desert, through the brush, that did not want to get caught, that were not getting caught. So the numbers, recently had crested, going on 2 million, 1.34 million, and going towards 2 million. And so that's just what was getting caught. It's unknown. It's difficult to say how many were not getting caught. And so in Del Rio specifically, people say, well, why Del Rio? What happened in Del Rio that all of a sudden we made national news? We had a Haitian camp, a Haitian mini city underneath the Del Rio International Port of Entry. And people saw those images. They're putting up little huts, cutting down the cane and building shade from the sun. Unfortunately, we saw those images that were misconstrued of Border Patrol agents on horseback, allegations of whipping and treating the illegal aliens harshly. Let me tell you, Joe, as a 30-year veteran of the Border Patrol, not only have I seen that our agents are capable and have enacted some tremendous, acts of kindness, compassion. I've seen our agents rescue people. I've seen our agents, go into the line of fire, for their fellow citizens. It's a long career since 1924 of agents serving our nation, protecting our sovereignty, so fighting, human trafficking. That's terrible. That exploits women and children. Our agents have been involved in the front lines of fighting, the sexploitation of women and children in our nation, and unfortunately, sadly, many have given their lives in the line of duty. I'm an ordained minister, but I was also a chaplain in the Border Patrol. I had the distinct honor of being the first uniformed chaplain in the history of the Border Patrol and putting together a chaplaincy program that is now nationwide. And it was with the intent and purpose of ministering to our agents and to their families, to our employees, which has now spread not just through the Border Patrol, but through our parent organization, Customs and Border Protection. And so under that Office of Field Operations, so they now have chaplains, and CBP Air and Marine Operations, which are the chopper pilots. And down here in the coast, you'll see our CBP Marine vessels out there. So they have chaplains, ministering to them as well. And so it's really a humbling thing. All honor to God to have been at the ground stage of developing that program for the Border Patrol. But they ministered also to the families of the fallen. And they also minister. Right now, it's very difficult to be a Border Patrol agent. With his Haitians, part of what we saw was just, it got up to almost 18,000 people living in this enclosed area, Joe. 18,000 people. That's the population of some of the cities that down here in the Grand Valley. Granted, not the big ones, but some of the smaller communities. There was a whole city down there. We saw a monumental effort from the state, local, federal, along with non-government organizations that reached out to these people, because you have a basic human need of feeding people, water and food. Those are the basics. And so, you're definitely going to have, ideological differences on that. But Del Rio saw this influx because I'll say it this way. One of the basic, tenets, basic foundational principles of our nation is that, we have boundaries. We have, and it's really actually biblical. You go to Acts 17, it says that from one man God created all the nations of the earth, and he set forth their boundaries and their times. And so, so boundaries exist out there. Nations have borders, communities have city limits, and even your house has walls and doors, to keep the air, cool air in during the summer, and colder, hotter, colder out during the winter. But it's also to keep people in and out of your house. I mean, that's just basic. And so what we saw in Del Rio was that a welcome wagon was put out in place. Come to Del Rio, and what I mean by that is, look, our elected leaders had a choice when this influx started coming into Del Rio, because the cartels are operating on the Mexican side. Remember, there is money to be made. There's a lot of greed involved with this. There's a lot of money to be made in not just human trafficking. Let me not forget the drug traffic. And so these cartels have been operating. They had their drug trails for decades. They've been pushing drugs that are destroying America. And unfortunately, because we have a demand issue here in America, so they were supplying, to our quote unquote needs here. Methamphetamines, marijuana, cocaine, fentanyl, which is deadly, a very deadly drug. And so they used those established drug pipeline, to bring in people. And so the cartels have been at work down there. When the green light went out, come to America, you're going to be welcomed in. They started coming. And in Del Rio, right off the bat, local non-government organization was reactivated. It had actually been active during the caravans of during the Trump administration, the George Soros-led caravans. So they were reactivated to go into full speed. And so that started taking place. So you got to start thinking about increments here. What started happening? The president says, come to America. They start coming to the Del Rio border, and our city and county leaders, in order to not be overwhelmed, say, look, let's get the NGO involved in feeding, clothing, providing showers, water, diapers, basic stuff, to get, and then let's get them out of here. We don't want them in Del Rio. We don't want them in Valverde County. Let's get them out of here. And so they started, the NGO, non-government organizations, started getting bus tickets for these people. And all of a sudden they started getting bussed in. But then the word goes out, and it's, come to Del Rio. They're going to put you on a bus out of here. And more people start coming. It got to a point where it started overwhelming the capabilities of the Border Patrol. And so Border Patrol, DHS, Department of Homeland Security, went to the congressman down there, Republican, by the name of Tony Gonzalez, and said, can you reach out to the military and ask them to use the airstrips at Laughlin Air Force Base to fly people out of the area? So let me give you a little bit of background about Laughlin Air Force Base, Joe. Laughlin is where the U-2 spy missions originated out of in the 60s. U-2 was a reconnaissance aircraft. It was a high altitude aircraft that had cameras in its underbelly. And word got out that there was something going on in Cuba. And so these U-2s flew over, and they discovered that the Russians were putting missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, on the island of Cuba, 90 miles off the coast of Florida. And so these U-2 missions discovered that imagery. So they originated out of Del Rio, Texas, where I live at.
The Cuban Missile Crisis.
The Cuban Missile Crisis during the John F. Kennedy administration. John F. Kennedy was a Democrat president, but man, that guy must have been gut-wrenching at such an anxious time. We went to the brink of war, nuclear war with the Russians. And thank God for John F. Kennedy at that time, because he kept a cool, level head. But the intelligence that he used to make the decisions to lead our nation during a very, very dark, scary time, those flights originated out of Del Rio. And so this congressman was asked to allow now people who had entered into the country illegally, who were not being tested for COVID, they were not being tested, they were certainly not being vaccinated for COVID, to allow them to be flown into the United States from Laughlin Air Force Base, where that historic, honorable mission took place. It was a slap in the face of all military personnel that have trained at that airbase. That's not the mission. Is to aid and abet in what we consider to be human smuggling. As a Border Patrol agent, we knew, and as a Christian, we knew, Joe, that sending out this green light to people and saying, come to America, was going to enable and embolden the cartels to push people into our country. And remember this, folks, you may not know this, but Texas is the #1 state in the country for human exploitation, for human trafficking. Joe, that is disgusting that here in this state, we are the #1, we have the #1 demand for the flesh of women and children, for women and children to be used as objects for sexual and perverse gratification. That's an affront. That's an insult to any decent person, regardless of how you identify, ideologically or anything else. Children and women are not objects. They are created in the image of God. And so now we're giving people the green light. Come to Del Rio. They'll let you come in. They will process you for asylum. They will feed you, clothe you, provide you diapers. There were at one point 300 pregnant women down there, and at least 11 births in the United States of Haitian parents who are now U.S. citizens. That put a tremendous strain on our small regional medical center down there. And so now they're being flown out of the country, and what transpired with that subsequently, Joe, they were flown to places like Alexandria, Louisiana, to the Old England Air Force Base down there. Subsequently, 300% spike in COVID across the country. All of a sudden, these people that were being flown out of Del Rio landing in Louisiana, and those communities starting seeing a spike in COVID. These people were flown to Mississippi and points north. Even reports of them going into Pennsylvania and up in those areas, and so it's no surprise that we started seeing a spike in COVID as well. And what I saw in newscast reports, CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Health and Human Services, 300%. It's no surprise, and so that's what was happening. And of course, it was controversial. There's both sides. People welcome immigration, people that believe in controlled immigration. The due process, law and order, and lately, what transpired was that there was these images of the agents of the horse patrol down there. Now you got to remember, these horses are specially trained. They're trained to go out into the desert, into the mountains, into the brush. They form a bond with the rider. Anybody that's done horseback riding will be able to relate to the relationship that can be created between the rider and the horse. And so they got these images of these agents down in the river, and they're trying to keep people, control the movement of people as they're coming in. And one of the things that happened was there was a picture taken where it looks like an agent is whipping, a man, a Haitian. Well, what a lot of people don't know, if you're not around horses, you don't know that there's reins that control. They look kind of like this cable, they're made out of leather, and they go into a bit into the mouth of the horse, and it's how you control the horse: left, right, straight, forward, gallop, whatever. And that's stirrups as well. But anyways, there's reins that are very long. They're called split reins because usually the reins are like in a U shape, but these are open. So you got two very long strips of leather, and as the horse is moving around, this leather is flying around, and they caught the moment when it looked like the leather is going onto this guy, and it's like it's whipping him. And man, people got outraged. Kamala Harris, who you don't hear from down in the border, all of a sudden is talking about, look at this wickedness. Of course, all the people to be expected, jumped in at the national political level. But then we had Al Sharpton come down here to the border, and he was shouted down and told, "Get out of here, Al Sharpton." And let me give you a reason as to why. Down here on the border, Joe, I grew up down here. I grew up, just a few miles from here in Alamo, Texas. I didn't know that I was a brown kid, honestly. I had teachers who I didn't know at that point were Anglo teachers. They were just my teachers. And I was just a kid living, with other kids in South Texas, going to school. My dad was a Cowboys fan. I was a Texan Tejano kid, loving the Cowboys, growing up in South Texas. I'm trying to say is, I did not know what racism was. I was just an American kid living in Texas. But then all of a sudden, you fast forward, and we have been divided now by color. We've been divided by gender, by all kinds of stuff that's taking place out there. And in Del Rio, we treat all people as human beings. Del Rio is a very hospitable, very compassionate city. We've had our share of troubles in Del Rio. We had the floods of '98 when Hurricane Charlie came and parked over our part of Texas, and it was a tropical storm, Charlie, and 8 people died, and we came together as a community. It wasn't black, white, green, yellow, red, nothing. It was Texans, Del Rioans, who need humans gathering together. And so now we had this situation where we had thousands of Haitians down here, and people responded to that. It's never been about hate for the people. It's been about the breaking of our laws, and then people who are helping these people out, they see a human need in there. But we did not want Al Sharpton to come in and say that this is a black-white issue, that this is racist Border Patrol agent issue or anything like that. It's not true. It's about enforcing our laws in an orderly fashion. And so Al Sharpton got shouted down. There was a guy down there that started asking him, "Hey, you're coming down here. We know what you want to do. You want to cause racial tension. You want to exploit the situation to feed your purposes, Al Sharpton. And this gentleman by the name of Anthony Aguero, he's been up and down the border covering issues for many years now. But Anthony asked him, what about the children? What about the children that are being exploited? What about the children that are being drugged to be brought in? Because he has images out there. He has video footage of where children, you can tell they're not sleeping. You can tell that they have been drugged to be brought in and to be used by the cartels to gain, so that the people that are with them can gain entry into the country, and then those children are then brought in because there is a real market here for the young bodies of children. I mean, it's horrible. It's pedophilia. It's sexual exploitation of children, and so Al Sharpton was told, don't come to our city. You're not going to divide us. And so there were some protests out there, and it was people from, whatever ethnic group or minority you want to say. It was just Texans, Del Rio, and saying, no vengas aquí, Al Sharpton, no te queremos aquí. We don't want you in our town. We don't believe in the ideology you bring to our community here. And so he fled, he left. And then we had some Black Lives Matter people come down. And it's like, now, hombre, I mean, we're not about that down there. We're not into that type of activity, taking place in our community. We all saw the images, 2019, 2020 of what was happening, Black Lives Matter and Antifa. So there was a lot of real fear in our community, Joe, a lot of concern. Not only are people running around in our streets that are here illegally, we don't know who they are. We don't know their backgrounds. They haven't been tested for COVID. We don't know if they have criminal backgrounds. They're running all over our streets. But now we have this added element of racial tension being injected into our community. Y allá nos la llevamos bien todos. We all get along together down there. And so we said, no, there was a group of people, and it was a sentiment citywide, but it was a group of brave people that said, we're going to go gather and show Texas and show the world that we are not racially divided in this community, And so he got the message, and BLM went down there, and there was no attention given to those people. We don't need that kind of stuff down there, So that's kind of what's been transpiring, But I will say this as well, Joe. That, to a certain extent, there's a purpose for government, and we need government. We need that orderliness. For city services. I mean, we're here in a facility. It's an incubator facility here for the creative arts. Where as I walked around over here earlier, I saw really the awesomeness. I've heard about the incubator concept, where one facility houses many different entrepreneurs and artists. It gives them a place to express their art, but also in some other communities, there's business incubators where small business owners can find a place, to fulfill the American dream. America is a land of opportunity, and sometimes we just need a leg up. And so that's, that's the way it should be. It's a temporary, momentary leg up, get started, fulfill the American dream. And it's really awesome to see this here. And there is a role for government. There is a role for elected officials. But I tell you, a lot of the problems in this country have been caused by politicians. I know we didn't want to get into politics, but I'll just say this. Politicians enact laws. The appointed leaders, that are appointed by, officials in many times, whether it's a, mayor, city manager, city council format, and in the county commissioners format, they enact local legislation, local policies that affect our lives. Think about it. Laws regulate the air we breathe, like through the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency. Laws regulate the way our food is prepared. Laws regulate, the way that seeds are planted and farmed and the way they're harvested. Laws regulate the way our clothes are made. Laws regulate even you here, what you can broadcast at what frequency, what wattage you can have. Laws regulate every aspect of our lives, and those laws are created by politicians. And when you have people in office that have only greed, selfishness in their heart, the people suffer because of that, Joe. And so it's awesome to see this incubator concept here. I would love to see it spread out, not just, in Del Rio where I'm at, but the entire border region. Look, I'm not, as I was saying earlier, I grew up in South Texas as a Texas kid. I was an American kid. I wasn't a brown kid. I wasn't a Hispanic kid. I had never even heard of those terms before, man. But there is one aspect that on the border regions, demographically speaking, ethnically speaking, you have these people that have roots back to the to Spain, to the Iberian Peninsula, and through human migration, through movement, it's come now into fruition here in Texas. But along that way, there was not just migration. Remember, there was conquest as well. And so you had, the Spaniards coming over to this hemisphere, and they moved through the land, and so then you had the mestizos that came out of the Spanish intermingling with the locals, with indigenous people. You had the Aztecs that were conquering local tribes, the women for as sexual slaves, the workforce, and then the human sacrifice aspect of their conquest. So conquest, expansion, migration is a part of the human history. But what happened with Texas is that Mexico invited people to come settle in this land. And then subsequently, as Mexico became, more heavy-handed with the Texians that lived here, and with the Mexicanos that were already here because it was part of Mexico, these people joined together in rebellion against the government of Mexico. So it was other Mexicans, and it was the Texians that had come in that rose up against the tyrannical government of Mexico, and they became a republic. And we saw that similarly in the United States, where we had the colonies that rose up against the king of England. And so there is in the heart of people, Joe, a desire for freedom. And there is room for government. Government is ordained by God, but then there comes a point where government only seeks to grow. And as government seeks to grow its footprint and its foothold and its fingerhold into lives, the trade-off is that individuals lose their freedom. And so we have to keep a careful eye on government, that it not become too big, too powerful, because then it stops seeing itself as the servant, el siervo de la gente, and it turns and wants to become el amo de la gente. It wants to become the master of people. And I would tell you, as a proud Texan, as a proud Tejano, who is a bilingual American, I am not to be owned by any party, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans. Somos gente Tejanos, Texans, and we love freedom. We love the entrepreneur aspect. I mean, as we're prepping for this, we were talking just about entrepreneur opportunities, but also the creativity that God has given us in our hearts to be creative, to share the gifts that God has given us with other people, to be a blessing to other people, And so those are just some of the things. I don't know if you have any questions for me as you've been listening to me here.
I don't want to interrupt you. Basically, we're here to hear you. Our listeners don't want to hear me. They hear me all the time. We want to hear you and what you have to say. So, feel free.
Okay. So I do have another concept. Look, folks, we're whether we were born in America, born in Texas, or wherever we were born here in the United States, there are boundaries, and there is a process, and some people have immigrated. There's some people that have been brought here, as children, that they didn't know they were, crossing an international line, and they were born here, But what I do want to say there about that is, this is the land of opportunity. America is a great country, and while there may be discussions and controversy and ideological ideas left or right, that here now, God has blessed, God has created us, and we're living in America, and this is a land of opportunity. And so in each one of us, we have gifts, we have talents, we have abilities, and so as we grow older, we find out what those are. Some of us develop, a desire to do something or be something, but some of us have natural abilities and talents. And so in life, we will be giving opportunities to share with others those gifts or talents. We'll be given opportunities opportunities to expand on that. And so when we couple that, you put it all together with the opportunities we've been given here educationally, to learn, to go to college, to study, to learn a trade with our hands, all that, as you put it together, results in the quality of life that we have here. And so we want the optimal quality life for all Americans. We want the optimal quality of life for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren. We want to make sure that the America we've been growing up in, which has been a land of opportunity, a land of where the entrepreneurial spirit can flow, a land where creativity can be expressed, that it not be suppressed, that it not be oppressed. And so there's some, full disclosure here. I was involved in politics, and I am, not just an influencer, but also an activist, for small government. I agree that we need that, but it does concern me, like for instance, that we had, in our community alone, 30,000 Haitians alone. That's not counting Venezuelans. That's not counting Colombians, Cubans, Africans. We had a lot of people from different nations come through Del Rio, but 30,000 Haitians alone came into our community. That's a solid number that I just saw like recently. So we've had several 100,000 people come in through the Del Rio sector when you think about all the nationalities, and very few, less than 1% of those, if any, Joe, were actually tested for COVID. Now, that's a very big deal in our country right now, and so people should ask, why is it that upwards of 1 million, 1.5 million people have come into our country? Such a big deal being made about COVID testing, mandatory vaccinations for people, which is very controversial. Why is it that almost 1.5 million people have been allowed to come in, and there was no talk, absolutely not a single whisper about mandatory vaccination for people that were entering our country illegally? But yet now we got all this talk about mandatory vaccination for Americans. So people have to ask that question: why? Why that double standard? And not only that, why is it that people are being threatened with the loss of their jobs, with the loss of their livelihoods? Here, here in this primarily Hispanic, bilingual region of the state of Texas, how are people reacting to being mandatorily vaccinated? And I'll give you one prime example. Any federal employee here that works here is being, whether it's Border Patrol, Office of Field Operations at the ports of entry, Air and Marine Operations, DHS, you have a big Citizenship and Immigration Services component here out of Harlingen, CIS. They are all being mandated to get vaccinated, or otherwise you face termination proceedings. That's a lot of money that this region would lose if people say, you know what, I'm going to make a personal decision to not get vaccinated. Look, if people want to get vaccinated, that's their thing. But I think it is inherently wrong to force any treatment on people. Now, there's some people who will say, well, what about polio? And what about, the measles and stuff like that? Look, those took years of testing, human testing. Years of time in the laboratory being examined, very small test pools to see what the results, the effects would be. We all know that the vaccine for this current pandemic virus was rushed through, and there's a lot of reports of side effects to that. So I'm also an activist for individual choice as to their medical treatment. We should all have the right to consult at length, to the greatest extent possible, with our own personal medical providers. And I don't like the aspect that que los ancianos los están espantando. The elderly are being scared and terrified to do this. I am just not my dad's son. I'm my mother's son, and my mom was a fighter. Joe, I'll tell you, my mom fought against the bonds of of religion. I'll tell you that. Her dad was a Pentecostal minister, and she went to the Baptist. She went to the other side because of what she saw as very restrictive, you know, you know, tenets, beliefs, and so she was a fighter, and she instilled in me that fighter, and it's the fighting spirit, Joe, por los oprimidos, for the oppressed. Es por el common man on the street. I will fight for the common man on the street. I will fight for la gente que no tiene voz. I will fight for the people that don't have a voice. What I've seen happen is that people, they come around and they tell you they want your vote and they make you all the promises, but then they get into office and they forget you. And it's just about getting more power, more prestige, more position, more plata, more money. And they forget the people. They leave us in the dust. They leave us behind. And government should be there for a limited purpose. And so, that's a part of who I am, is that I'm down here as a Texan voice. What I've noticed is that, there's a lot of big name politicians that are coming down into the Rio Grande Valley. And they're wanting to get involved down here locally. What I know, and I'm seeing it through the Republican Party. This areas have been Democrat for a long time, but what they notice, Joe, is that the people of South Texas, the people of Laredo and Eagle Pass and Del Rio, all the way out to El Paso, which is demographically primarily bilingual, Tejano, Hispanic people, as they've ethnically categorized us now, that we have power, that we have a voice, that we have a vote. And when we get together and we bond around the common issues, we start making a difference. And so all of a sudden, eyebrows were raised and said, whoa, there's something going on in the valley. And one of the biggest things was that right down the Stark County, right down here, went red, and voted for the Republican office, incumbents and candidates, primarily Trump was one of those things. But anyways, one of those persons, it caused an earthquake in politics. And so unfortunately what is happening is that voice wants to be exploited. And so I'm just saying to my family and to my friends and to the people of South Texas down here, to la gente, to the people down here, be careful that you not allow yourselves to be used by any one party. You are individuals. You have your own strengths and purpose in the eyes of God. The only person we should bow down to, and I say this as a Christian minister, is to our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. That's the only person we should bow down to. And everyone else, our government is there to serve us. We are its master. It is our servant. And we can never forget that. And these elected officials, whether it's the school board, the city council, the commissioners, any other kind of board, water district board or appraisal district, they need to be reminded constantly que ellos son nuestros siervos. They are our servants. It might rub people some wrong way, but look, gone are the days donde somos mansitos. We're not we are humble in spirit, but we are not like some of my uncles who are ministers have said, mansos pero no mensos. We might be humble, but we're not dumb, and we know that God has given us worth and dignity, and He's given us life, and He's given us a desire to be free. So those are just some of my thoughts. And it's hard to as you look at the path. I remember growing up in Alamo, but we would go to my grandfather's rancho in El Gato, down there by Donna, the south of Alamo, and they had I think it was 5 or 10 acres, and all my uncles on my dad's side got together and they bought Gramps a tractor. And so he would be seen out there plowing the fields, and he would plant cotton and other vegetables and stuff. And all my cousins would be running around down there barefoot without shirts, a very idyllic life growing up in South Texas. And I've had the chance to travel around, actually the world, see different parts of Europe and Central America and here in the United States. and I've seen, yeah, the racism exists out there. It is out there. I wouldn't be, I'd be a liar if I told you that I have not been discriminated against. Some awful things have been said to me, been called a beaner and some other things, bro. But you know what? I don't get offended at any one group of people, because I've seen racism from Hispanics toward other people, as I've seen it from black people towards everybody else, and white people. It exists. It's evil in people's hearts. But when we when we gather around the fact that we're children of God, and that we're Texans and we're Americans, then we have a united cause. And so that's part of what I'm also saying is, don't allow us to be divided, by our external differences. We can be united when we find those common causes. And it should be to be a blessing to others. God has blessed us, and we should bless others. And God has said it is more blessed to give than to receive. That's something I try to live by as well. So
that's an excellent message, and that's an excellent way of wrapping up an interview like this. And for those of you that are just joining us, we are talking with Frank Lopez, a 30-year veteran of the Border Patrol, and as well as a former service member in the U.S. Army, and a citizen and a resident of Del Rio, Texas. Yes. And so if you're just joining us right now, let's come go back and listen to the broadcast on our Facebook Live or YouTube channel, or on 97.7 FM, as we're going to continue broadcasting this, because he brought some really interesting and truthful and
factual
information here about what has really going on in Del Rio, Texas. Yes. And so I thank you for doing that. And as we wrap up the show, what would you like to, is there a thought or is there a message that you want to leave our audience with?
Yeah, we're this is a thought. We've seen, as I said earlier, the consequences of elections. The politicians regulate every aspect of our lives. So what I'm trying to say is that, folks, to a certain extent, we're living in the America we're living in because of decisions made by others. So we have to get involved. We have to get involved on whatever side. You have to get involved because you have a voice. But I would also say that you couple that desire, that necessity to get involved, with contemplation and seeking the face of God. We're seeing a disease that's in our country, but there's also other diseases. As Americans, we suffer from heart disease and diabetes and all kinds of other stuff. But that we also have a disease of the heart, and there is great evil happening in our land. We saw this massive flood of people coming to America, and along in that is being woven child and woman exploitation, sexploitation, and we need to pray. And that's what I'm trying to say is we need to humble our hearts. We need to look at ourselves and repent. There is a God. There is a creator God, and he is a just and righteous God. And he sent his son, the Lord Jesus Christ, into this world to create that bridge, not just for a relationship with him, but to make a way for us to spend eternity with him. And it's through Jesus Christ and the blood he shed on the cross. And so that's my parting thought. Be active in this world, fight for what you believe is right, but also keep an eye on heaven and eternity and get right with the Lord. And so that's my closing thought.
Excellent. Amen. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Sir.
As always, guys, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be open.
Yes.
And so thank you very much for making the time to come out here. I know, you're with your schedule and your traveling plans and all that. It was a struggle to rearrange some stuff on your schedule to be able to be here with us, to share with our audience. And so I thank you for making the time to come out here and share with our audience, because it's a message that they needed to hear. It's a message that everyone needs to hear. And the doors are always open here at 97.7 FM. Welcome back anytime. We can even, communicate and do some phone interviews, or we can work it out to where we can do some Zoom interviews even from your location. And
I'm always open to that.
We'll continue to bring information to our audience.
10-4 sounds good.
Now, real important, if people want to get a hold of you, how can they do so?
Okay, so thanks for that. Actually, I'm on Facebook. Frank Lopez Jr., U.S. Border Patriot. Frank Lopez Jr., U.S. Border Patriot. And I'm also on YouTube, Frank Lopez Jr., U.S. Border Patriot. So those are the two places right now. Trying to get into Rumble and everything else. There's a censorship taking place, in the social media platforms, especially if you don't agree to, certain thoughts out there. So I'm trying to expand Frank Lopez Jr., U.S. Border Patriot.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you. And they can PM me, and then we can communicate from there. I do get some hate, I do get some hate, but I get a lot of love as well. And it's just the way it is, man. But we can communicate, certainly.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, if there's anything, safe travels, first of
Yes,
all,
sir.
as
Thank
you
you.
travel back with your family to Del Rio. But if there is anything that our audience can do for you, please let us know. Don't hesitate.
Yes.
As you well said, our culture down here in the Rio Grande Valley is that we help each other.
Yes.
And so if there's anything that you ever need from our audience from down here, you let us know. We'll spread the word
Appreciate
and
it.
we'll send some help over. And collaborate however we can
Yes, sir.
to the citizens of Del Rio and whoever needs
Yeah, in Texas. Thank you.
in Texas.
Appreciate it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks again, and thank you for watching and listening. Keep it tuned right here to 97.7 FM, The City.
KCYP LP 97.7 FM, Mission McAllen.